All right, thank you. Good morning, afternoon, or evening to everyone. Today, I'll be giving you a brief overview of the Integrated Project Program Management Maturity and Environment Total Risk Rating, otherwise known as IP2M METR. My name is Dave Kester. I'm from Anthralytics. That is my company. And as was mentioned, full disclosure, most of my time is spent in support of the Department of Energy's Office of Project Management. They were the originators of this thought that I'll be presenting to you here in a bit. There's a lot to go over. I'm giving myself 35 minutes. I'm going to power through this the best I possibly can to give you as much information within 35 minutes, and then I'll leave 10 or so minutes towards the end for Q&A. If that would work for everybody, that way I can get through the materials in proper time. To save some internet bandwidth, I am going to, excuse me, I am going to go off of the picture. So let me do that, and hopefully that's happened. Let's proceed. On today's agenda, we have DOE PM Research Initiative background and results, IP2M METRR facilitated process. We'll talk a little about the process. I do have some examples of the process and some results of the analysis and insights that we'll also talk about, specifically the techniques and methods that IP2M METRR brings with this approach. And then finally, I'd like to leave you with some benefits of METRR. We are seeing some benefits in its use, so I'm pretty excited about it. So what prompted the research back in 2019? And oh, by the way, the research is ongoing. The Department of Energy, again, the Office of Project Management, sponsored an academic research initiative with the Arizona State University. And what they were seeking was to identify areas of alignment and disagreement among stakeholders on the use of EVMS. While some stakeholders regarded EVMS as a critical tool for transparency and oversight, others view it as a rigid compliance mechanism. Therein lies the quandary. This is the problem that the research sought to resolve. When you talk about earned value management, there is a lot of emotion on all sides of the spectrum. So what PM wanted to do was to find what was the best way of defining the EVMS and how best to go about it to where there was value for everyone involved in the process. And then finally, divergent views have contributed to the inconsistent implementation and varied effectiveness of the EVMS. Part of the reason for the loss, as you know, as PM and I observed in the use of the EVMS, is that it was being implemented inconsistently, and that created a lot of angst and some resistance along the way. At the end of the day, what we all wanted to demonstrate that there was clear value for money in project delivery. And we believe that, an effective EVMS in a high-performing environment can get us that. We have not lost hope in that. A little bit more about the research. Most notable outcome of the research is the IP2M METRR. And that was developed, this research project, through the combined expertise of government, industry, and academia. I believe there were 90 organizations involved in this. And again, as I said, this continues. It is ongoing. The IP2M METRR, we believe, moves beyond the traditional compliance checklist, those 32 guidelines, to better emphasize how an EVMS performs as a function of its operating environment, recognizing that effectiveness varies with context. So traditionally, maybe we've just looked at what I'll call the mechanics, those 32 guidelines. What the research found was that there was so much more to, taking a step back, understanding the forest from the trees. And there was I think, some significant findings out of the research that has made this, I think, more meaningful in terms of its implementation. Finally, the IP2M METRR maturity and environment assessments incorporate the the perspectives of customer, contractors, and stakeholders alike. This is a little bit of departure from the past. So traditionally, we'd have an EVMS compliance review. Let's say we're going to equate that to the maturity side of things. But even with that, the ASU research has redefined what that means, and I'll share what that is here in a few minutes. But the big thing coming out of this was that second element, the environment. And what METR does is it looks at both of those things individually and collectively, and it assesses each. But what's exciting about this, and where I think it varies from tradition, is this is not the customer inflicting pain on its contractor. This is a well-rounded conversation amongst customers, contractors, and stakeholders, because what the research found and shows is that all of those entities have a part to play in the implementation of that EVMS. While yes, it is the contractor's responsibility, typically on contract, to field that compliant EVMS, the reality is that all of those entities play a part in how well it does what it does. A little bit more about the research. The METR collects ratings and comments to generate scores. Those scores are plotted against color-coded ranges to reflect the EVMS maturity and the project condition, the environment conditions, I should say there. And I have an example of this. This is an actual example. You'll see this, an XY chart coming in future slides, to where through the assessment of both that maturity and the environment, we're able to get what we'll call a FICO score. And those two things plotted together will allow us to see where that project is and its environment as related to the 50 other projects that were part of the research. The research found strong positive statistical correlation between the EVMS maturity, that being the dependent variable, and the environment in which it operates, that being the independent variable. So look at it as the maturity as a function of the environment. And when we kind of take a step back and think about that's just kind of common sense. I mean, it's probably what everybody believes and knows, but it was never really a focus in any great level of detail when we went about looking at the EVMS in its full context. Just comparable to Mr. Lewin there, you see human behavior professional who developed the formula of the human behavior as a function of people and their environment, similar to that. So there was a lot of research done by ASU looking at that kind of information. Eric Trist, his research with the scientific method, socio-technical method was also considered. So they really did a real deep dive to get into the nuts and bolts of what makes an EVMS drive. And I think the positivity of all this, at least in the experience, and we've done a little over 20 of these, is really falling on the environment. People are really resonating with the environment and what we're finding and what can be done with that. And as an outcome, being that the environment drives the results of the maturity, they have a better management control system, or EVMS, as a result. What's really exciting also is, as most statisticians will tell you, that correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. We're actually seeing causation, where there's evidence of causation, the connection between the two variables. So we're able to now detect what parts of the environment are driving what features of that management control system, or the EVMS.
Dave, if I could just interrupt for just one moment.
Sure.
Steve, can you turn on the chat? Right now it's showing the chat's not available, Steve. We'll see what he can do. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, not a problem. Again, continuing with the research. So also, what that research found, that there were significant differences between projects implementing an effective EVMS and those who were less committed. So there absolutely was benefits to using an EVMS that works, that's effective in its proper context. It did make a difference. In the survey, the questioning of the research, what was also found in addition to that positive correlation based upon their analysis again, I think we're up to 50 projects showing that strong correlation, and you'll see the color codes. The higher the effectiveness and the better the environment resulted certainly in a better compliance with the EIA 748 should you have that requirement. But it also met the business objectives. Obviously, coming in on cost and schedule at technical scope is important to everyone, that those objectives were met as well. And then the customer satisfaction, right? When I'm producing and I'm doing things in the right way, I have a happy customer, and that was found to be a result as well. Finally, in all, what it found that building a high-performing environment is a continuous endeavor. That the environment is constant, it's always moving, and we have to be on top of our game to make sure that that environment is where it needs to produce the outcomes that we expect. In November of 2024, and Barry Livy, and thank you, Barry, for including me, conducted a CPM IP2M METRR survey. And I think there were 15 questions in that survey. And I'm only going to show you the results of 3 that I think of are interest to our conversation. One of the questions, when presented with the statement, an effective EVMS positions a project or program for cost and schedule success, you can see pretty much everybody agreed with that statement. And that's a great thing. That's what we expect and want. Similarly, another 96% agreed that a project and program's environment influences the effectiveness of the EVMS. So most of those respondents, as part of that survey, did make the connection that the environment influences the effectiveness or the maturity of the EVMS. It's the last bullet that I find intriguing, and I think where the IP2M METRR fits in. Only 50% agreed with this next question. Current EVMS implementation and oversight practices are effective. I found that very interesting, and I think this is where the IP2M METRR fits in terms of how it goes about doing what it does. I think people are wanting something new, something better, in terms of maybe the traditional approach to the checklist, if you will. And I think the IP2M METRR is bringing that new approach of being able to be tailored to the need while also providing a quantifiable way to assess your environment. So that was interesting. This is what the results basically boiled down to, is that there was belief in EVMS is strong amongst those respondents. Implementation concerns do exist per that last bullet, but improving context-specific application can close the gap between the EVMS's promise and its practical impact. There is a promise with the implementation of an EVMS, right? A lot goes into that. And the idea is that if I'm implementing that effective EVMS, there's going to be something positive on the back end of that. So its promise and its practical implication of, impact of positive outcomes has to be viewed in its proper context in its application, and therein lies the introduction to the environment. In a picture illustration, this is the IP2M METRR, a little marketing on the part of the Office of Project Management. You can see it up at the top. There's the socio-technical systems rating. That's Eric Triss that I mentioned. But it looks at the IP2M METRR in 2 parts. The first part being the maturity, the second part being the environment, and of course, those 2 things jointly being optimized in sync and working together. A little bit about what you're looking at very quickly. So in addition to, the research, getting away from that 32 kind of checklist mentality, it also wanted to I'll say, define what an EVMS actually is to those that actually use it. And this is where the focus was on the project managers and those folks that depend upon this tool to help them manage towards success. Not necessarily, built for the Himalayan monks that have all the answers. Certainly they play a part in this, but this was to take it back to its intended user. So you can see on the left with the maturity assessment where where the research fell was that there were 10 major sub-processes. You can see there from A to J. And the idea is that put in that context, those that are expected to use this tool for management decision-making and reporting could resonate with those things: organizing, planning and scheduling, budgeting, work authorization, all the way through risk management. What project manager or CAM or project director wouldn't want those things or need those things for that matter? On the right side, you can see the environment. The environment is defined by 4 categories: culture, people, practices, and resources. And it's that it's that environment, that independent variable that's pressing on that dependent variable as to how well that maturity can be, because the environment has a great influence on its implementation for all of those things. One last thing I'll point out on this slide is that in addition to the 10 major sub-processes, there were 56 attributes or characteristics that defined those 10 sub-processes. On the right side, those 4 categories were further defined by 27 factors, and we'll talk a little bit about of that as we go along. There's the maturity as a function of the environment, and again, just another way of looking at what IP2M METRR is trying to accomplish. And we actually use this as part of the research. You can see up in the right-hand corner, this was adapted from the NDA Scalability Guide. And this kind of flow chart in a picture showed the interconnectedness of those management sub-processes and the major practices that went along with those. So I'm sure we're all very familiar. There are the 10 sub-processes from organizing all the way to risk management, but you can see the boxes and the practices of organizing, defining, organizing the work. What also was accomplished in this was the association, because we can't lose sight of the fact that in many cases there is an EIA 748 requirement. There are guidelines associated with that particular practice. I listed just a few, so the illustration would not get cluttered. But you can see the 10 major sub-processes and how they interrelate with one another. To the left side, I'm calling the planning phase. To the right side, the execution phase. And what happens is once the project or program is in motion, this happens, right? The environment, we call these the pressure points. Those are those 27 factors that I mentioned. And the research found that there were 27 things that put pressure on the effectiveness of an EVMS or a management control system for that matter. And that's where the independent variable, the environment pressure points, absolutely have to be considered when considering the effectiveness of that EVMS, which is the flow chart behind it. These are just 2 examples. To the left side, so with the research they developed, I mentioned those 56 attributes. What you're seeing on the left side, and you can see for sub-process organizing, that first box you saw on the previous slide, Alpha 1, product-oriented work breakdown structure. This is the first attribute of the 56. So what the research team did through a lot of research, you can see at the bottom left-hand corner, there were a lot of reference materials that they use, the ISO, the PMI, etc. You can see the listing of all that to come up with the definition of what that meant. And then through the research and through the interaction of the members, they came up with maturity levels from 1 to 5. It was important to the research that we're not looking or communicating the expectation of perfection. right? That's not what we're after. And that's where they concluded that a 4 would get you to that EIA compliant level. And you can see that these are just grades of goodness as they go along, with 5 being the optimization in this particular case for developing a product-oriented work breakdown structure. So as you do the assessment, what the teams will do is look at the data, whether it's, data driven or anecdotal. They'll make an assessment of what particular vein they believe that particular attribute is in. And this is where it gets, kind of interesting, and where it's flexible. You can either do the assessment at the what I'll call the above the line, the definition of 1 through 5, or you could do below the line, which gets into a little bit more granularity with what the expectation is. So depending upon your need, maybe the risk level of the project, the life cycle of where it's at, et cetera, a lot of things need to be considered as to how far and deep you go, whether I use all 56 attributes, or maybe it could be a spot check with perhaps a particular sub-process of interest at a particular maturity point in a project, let's say planning and scheduling, for example. On the right side, this is an environment template. You can see there's culture. I mentioned that there were 4 categories, this being culture. You can see the rating levels for it, all the way from not acceptable all the way through high performing. Again, the idea is you want to be at meets most. That means that that particular factor is functioning where it ought to be, with maybe a few things that have to be corrected. You can see the factors for culture there on the left side with the arrow pointing down, 1 alpha all the way through 1G. Those are the 7 culture factors that the groups will be asked to consider in terms of doing this assessment. The numbers that you're seeing for each one of those are the weighted scores. That's what gets us to that FICO-like score that I had mentioned. And I think in a coming slide, it'll reveal itself as to why that's important. But what's kind of cool about this is that for both the maturity or the effectiveness of that control system and the environment, we can quantify down to the particular attribute or factor. So you can really zero in on perhaps maybe something that has to have an additional conversation. A little bit about the process. When you're getting ready to do an assessment, certainly you want to have the appropriate sample size so that the result is reliable and representative of the whole. Participants are placed in logical groups. So as we do the assessments, we like to compare the results from group to group. This provides us great insight because these are the people that are expected to implement that EVMS for various purposes. So the 4 groups that we would be assessing in an environment assessment would be the contractor's leadership, those in decision-making authority positions that depend upon the data from that system to make their decisions. Then we have the contractor practitioners. Think of those folks as the mechanics. These are the folks that keep the systems, the integration of those systems, cost and schedule, et cetera, P6, COBRA, working as intended based upon their written practices. The assessments both last about 2 hours. And again, they can be tailored, so that time can be a little flexible. The environment assessment we do a little differently than the maturity. The environment is on a individual basis, and it's anonymous, not autonomously. It's anonymous. So what we do is we ask for those groups, the contractor, and I think I forgot to mention the other 2, contractor, leadership, practitioners. We also have the local customer. And then we have the stakeholder. Typically, that's a headquarters entity that's providing its oversight responsibilities. But for the environment, we have each of these participants from those 4 groups. On average, we average between 45 and 50 folks amongst those groups when we do an environment assessment. We really get a good turnout, and each participant provides their input for those culture factors, people factors, the practices factors and resources factors and they'll go online into the IP2M METRR tool and record their responses individually. Being anonymous is very important when it comes to the environment, what we're finding, because that's a very touchy subject. So having them feel free to say it the way they think it is very important. Conversely, the maturity assessment, we put three groups, the contractor, the local government, and then the stakeholders. They will provide an assessment of those 56 attributes based upon the scoring scale that I gave you. Both of those assessments have a range of 1,000 points. Facilitator role, it's what we're finding is having an independent person separate from the projects helps a lot. The facilitator is the one that's in charge of executing these assessments in their proper order and their proper approach. And they will lead the participants through those 27, through those 56, and ask them to highlight they will identify, highlight key points for their consideration. I have a slide that I'll give you an example of what a facilitator slide looks like in that regard. The rating process, this is where once the participants hear what that factor or attribute means in a very easy to understand way, they will be asked to rate it through that scale and then provide the commentary to support that rating. It is the commentary that is the gold in all of this. So where we depart a little bit from tradition is this is not Dave Kester looking at the commentary for, let's say 2,000 comments over those 50 people. We really employ AI to remove any bias, and everything that we do comes from those comments in terms of our analysis and recommendations. So everything is coming from those groups and how they respond to the 27 and the 56. We take that as the starting point and then try to make sense of, what that means. So everybody has a skin in the game, if you will. When rating, the participants consider each factor and attribute from their point of view. Based upon whatever their role and responsibility is for the project and for implementing that management control system. We ask participants to base their ratings and comments on the current state of things, not how they would like them to be. We really want to get a sense of, wherever we're at in the life cycle of that project, we want to know what they think at that particular point in time. That's very important so we can unravel any kind of issues. And then, of course, we have an automated tool that facilitates the efficient execution of those assessments. And again, it helps us collect, organize, analyze, and then report out the results. And I'm going to share with you a few of those to hopefully give you a better understanding of this. So what you're seeing here is this is a facilitator slide. So you saw when I showed you with those two templates, there was a lot of words, and this happens to be the environment factor. This was that template to the right side. So there is an ASU research paper that goes, it's very lengthy, a lot of words that will explain what commitment of the contractor organization means. What the facilitator does is he takes all of that and boils it down to 3 salient points. And that's what you're seeing here. So as we do the assessment, and I'm having the participants in front of me behind the computers who are going to input their ratings and comments, I will ask them, in what ways have you observed that? And I will go through each one of those 3 bullets. Does the contractor organization genuinely value the EVMS to drive and improve performance? Do they really believe in its promise, if you will, that we talked about? The contractor organization consistently follows an integrated project management approach, leveraging the EVMS to manage scope, resources, and performance effectively, and then the organization exhibits the right attitudes and self-discipline. If I don't have the right attitude, and this is we're simply looking at the contractor right now. There are factors that simply look at the local customer and stakeholders as well, so we can get an idea of what everybody is thinking. But if I don't have the right attitude, if I really don't believe that the EVMS is going to position me for success, or I think that it's a regulatory burden and I'm going through the motions, I can assure you that that system is not going to work as intended. And what I just described to you has to do with the environment, right? That is people and their behaviors and attitudes that have a result on the effectiveness of that EVMS. And then finally, you can see the fourth bullet there to kind of put this in context for the folks and show them this is kind of a best practice. In this case, we use Jim Collins' Good to Great book, and just a practical application of the commitment of the contractor and what we would glean from his book as to why that is important. Now, this is the very interesting chart that everybody likes after we do these assessments. You can see the X, Y. You can see the environment at the bottom. We see the Y variable to the right with maturity. This is the FICO-like scores that I talked about. So as we go through the assessments, we collect the 2756 or a subset thereof, depending upon the need. We will come up with scores. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is looking, and these don't quite line up, but you can see up the top, we used the research used the Bruce Tuckman model from the 60s, performing organizations and the phases that we can expect them to go through. The research felt that that was spot on for how we could explain the environment as it goes through its phases. And typically, you can see the percentages there, and I'm waving my hands, right? There's no hard and fast rule, but typically forming is 0 to 10% of the project, 10 to 25 for storming, 25 to 40 for norming, and then performing. What's unique about the colors, this gets back to the research and the correlation I talked about. Obviously, where you want to be is in the yellow and green. If you're in the green, and there are projects that ended in the green, it means that you're going to meet, based upon the research, you're going to meet your cost and schedule objectives and make your customer happy and all those other things we talked about. The norming, or the yellow phase, where the X and Y intersect, means that you're very close to meeting those objectives, and with existing contingency or management reserve, you can fall within the constraints that you've been given. It's really that orange and red. If you're in that quadrant, you have some problems because you're not going to meet your objectives, and it's going to cost you a little bit more. It's going to take you more time to do. That's what the research found. Now, what's interesting about this is an actual result of one of our assessments. You see two things to the left and right of that cluster. You can see back in March of 2024, there are the groups that I talked about: practitioners, leadership. There's the average of all four customer stakeholders. Those are the groups. Again, you can see the X and Y in terms of maturity and environment scores. The environment being, for example, practitioner 761, the maturity being 731, and then it plots it very closely to that strong correlation line that ASU came up with its research. But you can see the cluster there from March. Now, you can see back in April when it was 49%, we came back to the same location, same project, and we conducted the same environmental assessment, maturity assessment, to see if things had gotten better through actions from, when we were there on March 24 and had conversations as to what needed to be addressed. The two circles that you see, the dashed lines, are showing the significant progress that was made. So let me try this as the best way of doing this. In March, the customer and the stakeholders, the government, if you will, those were the biggest skeptics of the project, not necessarily the contractor. So in March, you can see the customer where their point fell. But you can see that they went to the top level in April. So the local customer felt that the environment improved significantly, going from storming to norming, and as a result, the maturity of the EVMS and what it was producing, and the results that they were getting were far superior. So you can see they were top shelf there. The leadership practitioners kind of stayed the same in terms of what they felt, but this was the biggest skeptic, the stakeholder. Sorry. The stakeholder, you can see where they are. They were not very impressed with the EVMS or the environment, but in a year's time, you can see where they ended up. Much better, going from forming to the end of almost storming. The two circles are showing you the progress that was made between the best and the worst. So you can see that longer circle is showing basically the March 24, the separation of the participants in terms of their view of things, and how it's getting tighter now, and most being associated in that norming stage, and they're at about 49%. So again, this is viewed as progress, as a good thing. But all of that came through the assessment, the quantification of those weightings, and then you can plot it on the X and Y, and you can see over time, you can take the pulse of the environment and maturity to see if in fact the actions are paying off in the right ways. And I'll hurry here. The analysis and insight, we do use the AI to help us with the analysis, and we do, once we gather all of this information, we go back then to the contractor's location with a subset of those four groups, not the full 50, but let's say maybe there's 20 people, with four representing each of those groups. And through the AI, based upon their comments, we develop a SWOT analysis. Again, all coming from their comments. It will tell us what the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are based upon what they are saying. So again, this isn't what Dave thinks. This isn't me trying to look at it through my rose-colored glasses. This is the AI going into those 2,000 comments and then it producing a SWOT analysis and breaking it out based upon the definitions of a SWOT as to where things are. And of course, then we would go back and discuss each one of these. What we find very helpful is the fishbone analysis and the 5 whys. And this is where we're breaking it into those environmental groups, those 4 groups with causality, the causes. We'll ask the AI to go in, again, using the same comments. We'll then feed it a maturity finding, for instance, and you'll see the example here where maybe the EACs weren't being produced in a timely and accurate way. It will then fish through all those comments to figure out what could be a possible cause of that maturity feature not working, and it will produce as many of those as I want. And again, just leveraging that AI to interpret the results to make sure that we're not being biased and we're being fair in our assessments. The facilitators that run these are to be independent. So they're not taking sides. They're going to treat the government participants just as they would the contractor participants. And then everybody feels a sense of fairness in that process. This is an example of that SWOT. I'll just kind of show that, and you all will get these slides. You can digest this more, but I'll ask that AI, based upon the comments, to give me the top 3 of the SWOT. This happens to be the weaknesses, and these are the things that we can take back and talk about. So the resource constraints, inconsistent commitment, manual processes. Somewhere in those comments, those 2,000 comments, there was enough of the comments that made the AI say that there are resource constraints, there's an inconsistent commitment, and then there's manual processes that are making that weak. And then we can dig deeper into each one of those. Here's just a picture of a fishbone. You can see there's the 4 categories. You can see the culture. There's the AI generated. So it will give me conflict avoidance, cultural norms around accuracy, incentive structures. And then from there, you can dive into the 5 whys as to why that might be happening. But you see it's tied to the maturity issue of EAC updates. And this is how the two kind of come together. So if the thinking is that the environment drives maturity, I should be able to go into the environment and figure out what is happening in the environment that's causing there to be inconsistent EAC updates. And that's where the AI will help us fish through all of that to get to having the conversation amongst those four groups, because that inconsistency doesn't necessarily mean that it happens to be a contractor issue. It could be that there's a local customer that doesn't want a certain number to be revealed, for example, and we've seen that. And as a facilitator, being an independent entity in this, as that's a very sensitive topic, we go about this in a very sensitive, professional way. But it's a conversation that needs to be had that probably traditionally won't be had, that if we're expecting to get that particular maturity issue addressed and resolved. So, so far, so good. We have everybody, that is participating, seeing this as helpful. We don't make this accusatory. It's all meant to be collaborative and enhance communication, getting to the resolution of issues that at the bottom line, at the end of the day, keeping us from success. These are just the environmental causes, the conflict avoidance, accuracy to detail, in terms of that fishbone. So what AI will do, what you're seeing here on the fishbone, I'm just providing what the title is. Then the AI dives into a deeper definition of what that means as a cause. And then, of course, I don't think I've put it in here, but it also provides me recommended corrective actions. What's the complexity of the corrective actions? Who would be who's the owner of the particular issue? It provides a lot of unbiased detail to where we can, as facilitators, go back and we find the recipients of this, those four groups, very open to getting this. And we ask them, because a lot of this is AI generated, does this resonate with you? And there's been, I can't think of a case to where they've challenged the AI that no, absolutely, that's not what's going on here. Most absolutely agree with what we come back with, because keep in mind, this is coming from their comments. They're the ones that are generating this through what they've told us. What we find very useful is in engaging as part of this feedback process. We use Mentimeter, any kind of survey tool, and we ask them. You can see there's the practices, those four groups for the EAC realism we were just talking about. Poor data quality. If you were to look at that fishbone, there are the three causes. And then we have them rate. Hey, which one of those causes most resonates with you and has the biggest impact? And you can see in this case, almost half said poor data quality. So this is how we engage them. And then, of course, they're drawing that back to comments and the fishbone. And then finally, we ask them, in terms of that same EAC realism for practices, what is the easiest to address? And they felt the easiest thing to address in resolving that would be the fragmented information, that could be most easily corrected. And conversely, we also asked them what they believe the hardest is going to be, so we can have that conversation. Let me jump ahead, and in conclusion, top benefits. So we believe that this can create a competitive advantage to projects and companies and organizations. It offers a clear data-driven way to manage performance, and it can identify the cultural issues that we talked about, key obstacles to building high-impact organizations. The competitive advantage being that if I can identify where in my environment that perhaps I need to address, it has just carry on positive effects in terms of misalignment of the culture, weak team cohesion gap. These are the things we often just take for granted, if we take for granted at all, if we even think about the environment, that it's there, and oftentimes it isn't there, and these things do have an impact. So it can position an organization for an advantage. Predictive and forward-looking, again, if you believe in the research at X and Y, that we have the environment driving the maturity, it can be predictive and forward-looking. As we look in our environment, we can readily assess perhaps maybe some maturity things. If not want to address the environment in and of itself, we can actually pinpoint what attributes perhaps are operating at less efficiency. Scalable, cross-disciplinary, the meter can be flexible. like I said, of those 56, of those 27, those could be tailored to your need. For example, in that the XY chart I showed you, the assessment that we did, we looked at 16 environment factors. We didn't do the full 27, and we were able to get the same dynamic that we needed. So we're always looking for ways to optimize what we're doing with meter, and we're trying to fit it, tailor it to the need. Connection to effectiveness through user input. This is what I like, is that it's connected back to those that are held responsible for implementing a good environment or that management control system. This is their inputs. They have skin in the game, and they see how that then connects to the outcome of the environment or the management control system. So the individuals can influence the outcomes based upon their experience. They have the power. It is them, the people, if you will, and it's culture that will allow us to be successful. Connection to self-governance certainly promotes accountability by encouraging people to take ownership. This could be incorporated as part of a self-governance program and keeping the pulse on both the environment maturity. And then finally, I talked a lot about facilitators and giving them some credibility. The certification, ASU has created a certification program that, again, would verify the skills and knowledge for using the IP2M meter. And with that last slide, this is the class of 2024. We had about 37 folks that went through the ASU IP2M meter certification program. It's a 2-day course. They're tested. And then they're expected to go out and actually implement the IP2M meter in a real setting. And then what happens is, once that is achieved, they will receive their certification. So there's some credibility for operating the EVMS, being a facilitator, being able to bring sides together, managing data, etc. And then with that, I thank you for your time. And if there's anything more that I can assist you with, any kind of information, there is my Gmail account that I would offer up. If you want to get a hold of Steve or Becky, they could certainly get a hold of me. But if you have any questions, comments, or you need information or materials, please let me know. And with that, Steve, Becky, I'll hand it over.
Thanks, Dave. I just want to make one clarification for those that aren't within the US and aren't using 748. ISO 21508 captures all the same things, but they only have 11 criteria listed. I've worked in other countries where there's been 11 to 15 criteria that various governmental organizations work with. When I work with private clients, I tend to go to the 21508 with only 11. It's not nearly as intimidating as 32. Dave, when you speak of the contractor organization, that's the performing organization. So if somebody wanted to use this for internal projects, programs, they could just think of it as a performing organization, correct?
Yes, that's correct, Becky.
Okay. Steve, you can see the questions. I can't. I had to use the Q&A area.
Well, I was going to ask, does anybody want to ask David a question? Put your hand up if you do. Michelle Storm. Hi, Michelle.
Hey, everyone. I two questions. One, is the research available for others to read? How can we see the original paper?
Yes, it is. There is a lot. The ASU put out numerous reports. I'll give maybe Becky and Steve the link to that, and you can go in, and there's just incredible amounts of information on the research itself and its results.
Awesome.
If you'll send us that link, we'll make sure that the attendees at least receive it.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do.
And then my second.
Oh, sorry. Right. Yeah, go on, Michelle.
My second question is the certification available to us commoners, or do you have to be an ASU student?
Oh, no. it's for anybody and everyone. Absolutely. It's not just limited to ASU. So if you have an interest in wanting to facilitate and go through that training process, I think I'm waving my hands when I say this, just because of some of the craziness that's going on here. They were supposed to have their 2025 session in May. They've actually are going to do that in November at their ASU location in downtown DC. I think that's the plan, at least. So I can certainly get information if you all are interested in that, but it's certainly open to anyone and everyone that's interested in wanting to do this.
If folks want to find out if ASU will facilitate the certification training, et cetera, within their region, say over in the UK, could you facilitate those discussions for them?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Okay, next question. That's you, Karen.
Okay, thanks. I put it in the Q&A, but I guess you're not looking at that. Thank you very much indeed. Very interesting. Interested to hear about you were using AI to generate possibilities, I think, if I understood you correctly. And I was just interested to know whether you used just one large language model or AI or several different ones, because of course the relationship you have with your AI or LLM, you'll get different answers, and of course different bits of software produce different results.
So the Office of Project Management has its own what they call PARS GPT. It's its own AI that it's created. I probably can't go into the amount of detail probably you want, because I'm just not that savvy in it. But for things of sensitivity where there are names or project names, individual names, things like that, they want all of that run through their internal PARS GPT to protect it. So the Office of Project Management has its own homegrown AI. With that said, for those things that aren't as sensitive, Chat GPT, sometimes I'll use that just to get a feel for things, and it provides me some very insightful responses back. But the sensitivities of, as we start to deal with people's names and numbers and things like that, we try to protect that through the GPT. One other thing on that note, one of the promises that the facilitators make to the people, especially when you get into the environment where it gets a little sensitive when it's asking about commitment and behaviors and things like that, is that their scores are never, or ratings and comments are never shared or directly reflected back to them. That's why we kind of lump it into those groups, or I would lose the confidence then of people feeling protected in order to give me the truth. So that's worked out very well.
Thank you very much.
Dave, I've got one question here on the chat, wanting to know about how the stability of the project teams, how that impacts the real setting testing. What's the relevance of stability?
If I'm interpreting the question right, I would think if there was high turnover in a project, if I'm interpreting that question right, that would have some kind of influence on the environment. And if you were to believe in the research, either one way or the other, and if I have a project team that's constantly turning over, the cohesion needs to build upon itself, through that Tuckman model. It takes time to go through these phases in order to get to a certain point. People need certain time together in order to trust one another, etc. So I would think if a project is constantly in turnover, it would put a challenge on that environment.
Then we have a couple related questions about how can other organizations and any agencies apply the methodology tool?
Certainly we'll share our information. I think I saw Barbara on the call. So the Department of Energy partnered with NASA for one of their earned value reviews in Boulder, Colorado. And I was fortunate enough, along with one of my other colleagues, to facilitate that for NASA following this format. Again, tailored to their need. It wasn't all 27 factors. I think there we used 12. But We're able to get that same FICO score depending upon if I use the full 27 or the 56. I can prorate the XY chart, if you will, to give me that FICO-like score. But I can certainly share information. The idea with the facilitator certification is that there would be a community of folks to where people could reach out and get assistance. I'm just convinced that having a person that is independent from the project to where perhaps they're not as familiar with even internal surveillance, they're familiar with that person and maybe, want to be protective with how far they want to say things. Having that kind of new face, we get richer results. But certainly, if they're interested, I can share, additional information as to how they could set up the process and that sort of thing.
Do you know of any non-governmental organizations, in other words, those that have a contractual obligation using tools?
I don't know offhand, who all is using that in that regard.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. ASU might be able to answer that. Steve, do you have any more?
Yes, I do. I've got Mr. Paul Baguli, who is the senior lecturer in project cost management from the University of Manchester.
Excellent.
Unmute yourself, Paul.
Hi. Very, very interesting. Thank you for the talk. I look forward to distributing to our students. We've got hundreds of students in project management who will benefit from a recording of this. Can I just ask a quick question? We're experimenting building cost estimating with ChatGPT and custom GPT with students, and I guess the two questions we're up against at the moment is how much does it cost to develop an AI-driven tool like this as compared to software? What the scale of development cost is, also what the cost model of development is itself, and maybe a bit more into the pre-trained model, or you said it was past GPT, what the choice of model was, if that's possible. That's not sure whether you can tell us that, but
I will certainly. Yeah, sir. I will certainly get back to. I'm not the expert. I'll talk. Amber Young is the person that is in charge of the Office of Project Management, developing that. I'll certainly get those answers for you and share that back to you if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah. Is it okay to distribute this to students, because we got about 400 master students who would be really interested.
Absolutely.
In engaging.
I think
Thank
also.
You,
I was just going to say, you may also find very interesting when I give the link to the ASU research. There is a lot of information as to how they did what they did that would be, I think, of interest to you and your students as well.
Excellent. That's brilliant. Thank you.
And you'll also have the professors who did the research, so you'll be able to make contacts that way.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question, David?
Sure.
Is this analysis, this assessment, is this coincident, or is the appropriate moment to do this review, this inspection at the coincidental with IBR, Integrated Baseline Review? Is it the start of the project, as it were?
So that's very interesting and a great question. So the simple answer is yes. We're finding, we tend to think of this as we only implement this when there's an earned value compliance review. It's so much more than that in terms of its applicability, especially the environment side of things. And I could see where the environment would be just an added feature to an integrated baseline review as part of that process.
Yeah, because I think there would definitely be some benefit in integrating the this environmental aspect, this cultural aspect, into that question set almost, and to have them run as part of the overall mobilization of the project. Really, maybe. Okay, well, I think we'll probably be getting some follow-up on this. Daryl, you had your hand up.
Yes, sir. Dave, this is towards to you and the IPM 2 meter team. If you were to play AI God for one whole day, how would you go back and restructure the IPM 2 meter to make it a better program using AI?
I like the structure of it. I like what I like about it, Daryl, is that it's tailorable, it's scalable, and I think that's what a lot of people are looking for. It's not the one size fits all, so I can inject whatever process at whatever particular maturity point in a project, whether it be all of them or maybe some of them. Um, and again, the environment with the 27 factors, I think, scratches that itch. I mean, through this research that the ASU research team found that these are 27 things that most likely would affect that EVMS. What's interesting is, Daryl, and hopefully I'm answering your question. So when the research was done, the research kind of was up to the point of defining how to do the assessment, and creating a tool to automate that. It's really the next phase of us doing this to where we've taken it to the next step, of, okay, now that I have all this information, logically, what do I do with it? And this is where we've, associated with SWOT and with the fish bones and following back with a causality, things like that. So, what I think is where ASU is being encouraged with their ongoing research is to continue to gain information from projects to see if we still have that strong correlation. What they tell me is it's even getting stronger, that these two things absolutely are connected. But the research could involve anyone on this call and everyone to get involved as to, okay, what are some of the analytical techniques or methods that we could use in order to gain the insights with the power of AI. What I like about the AI, believe me, I'm not an AI expert. I don't pretend to be one, but I'm smart enough to know how to prompt it and ask it questions in certain ways. And it will provide me the unvarnished truth to where I could never in my wildest dreams end up at the conclusions or the results that it gives me, because I'm biased. I've been at this for 36 years, right? I have my ways of thinking. This allows there to be a total fairness in terms of what it spits back. So I think the back end of this is, hey, the analysis features and how I present it then is kind of the next phase of where ASU needs to go, and hopefully we can get some participation with some smart folks as to what some ideas might be. But certainly the SWOT and the fishbone have worked very good for us in reporting back to the projects, and those folks engaging with us as to how they could correct their environments or improve their EVMS. Hopefully that answered it, Daryl. I'm sorry if I didn't.
It actually did answer that. It just answers, well, sort of answers the question that we all ask, as a human being, is AI do something never done before? And that's something it can't do at this time.
Dave, I want to thank you for your participation in the GCC. I want to thank all the attendees, not only those that asked questions, but those that lent their ears. We appreciate you. And Steve, thank you for teaming with us on this, and we'll be in talks about the next one.
Yes, indeed. So just to give you an update, we're going to receive some information from David. And again, thanks again to him for this fascinating presentation and conversation. We'll probably get that together either late this week or early next week. It'll be distributed to all of you who've attended, and it will be freely available through the various networks that we have. Particularly, I'll follow up with you maybe directly, Paul, just to make sure you've got the right stuff. Paul from Manchester. Just a brief advert for the next Global Conversation Club. It will be on the 8th of July. So hopefully that doesn't interfere with public holidays. And it will be a Mr. Sirish Parekh, who is from our Treasury, from an organisation called NISTA, which is responsible for major project oversight in major projects for the government. He's responsible for estimating portfolio performance and is deeply interested in how estimates are put together. And he will be discussing and giving his opinion on reference class forecasting. Reference class forecasting, very popular. Lots of people trying to get us to use it. He has very strong opinions about this, and is in a senior position within government to influence how the government actually does carry out its estimating. He's also involved in the creation of a new specification national standard for estimating as well. So that's on the 8th of July. News about that will be distributed in due time. But again, along with Becky, thanks for attending. Thanks for supporting this. I hope you found it useful and informative. You can always follow up with questions and lines of inquiry with myself or Becky as we go forward. And on that note, I wish you either a very good evening or good afternoon, and see you again. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.